You're not listening, Daniel, Melissa said, slamming the sponge into the sink as if it had personally offended her. This isn't the 1950s. I'm not your maid. I blinked. I had just walked in from work, tie still loose, laptop bag barely set down, before she launched into what felt like her latest declaration of war. "And you're not working," I replied carefully, trying to match her tone without setting off the entire room. "So how is splitting chores 50-50 fair when I'm gone 10 hours a day?" That was enough. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Her hazel eyes, usually calm, sharpened. "Oh, so now I'm a freeloader? Is that what you're saying?" "No," I said, exhaling slowly. "I'm saying this sudden list of house rules you typed up and stuck on the fridge like a corporate memo feels less like teamwork and more like punishment." "You don't get to dictate how I feel about equality," she shot back. "I'm tired of picking up your slack and pretending it's love." That line, polished, sharp, clearly rehearsed, landed harder than I expected. The kitchen, which once smelled of cinnamon and late-night wine, now felt heavy with resentment. Plates sat untouched on the table. The chicken was getting cold. So was I. "Is this really about the dishes, or are you still upset that I said no to that weekend with Kara and Justine?" Her silence answered me. Of course. Kara and Justine, Melissa's constant advisors, both recently divorced, both outspoken about their refusal to compromise. They approached relationships like temporary housing, acceptable until something more appealing appeared. "I won't be controlled," Melissa said, quietly but firmly. "Not by you, not by anyone." I leaned against the fridge, steadying my breathing. "No one is trying to control you. I'm asking for balance." "Respect?" she scoffed. "You mean obedience. Same thing in your world, right?" And just like that, we stopped pretending this was about chores. We circled each other with arguments that weren't new, but tonight they felt sharper. Years of small disappointments surfaced in scattered, raised fragments. The structure of our marriage, once solid, even if imperfect, began cracking from within. We didn't eat dinner. We didn't speak again. We turned off the lights and drifted to opposite edges of the bed, like survivors of a wreck, still carrying the impact of the collision. Even in the silence, I felt it. Something had shifted, not bent, but broken. And I understood this wasn't just a bad night. It was the beginning of something else. The next evening, I came home to laughter, loud, overlapping, slightly exaggerated. Kara and Justine. I paused at the door longer than necessary, key still in the lock, fingers gripping it as if bracing for whatever version of Melissa waited inside. They were settled on the living room couch as though it belonged to them. Kara, with her dramatic black nails and oversized wine glass, dominated the conversation. Justine, wrapped in a silk robe she wore like armor, nodded enthusiastically at every remark. Melissa sat between them, hair down, makeup done, no trace of last night's tension. This was her public version, polished, charming. "I told him if he wants a live-in maid, he'd better start paying me a salary," Melissa said, stretching the last word for emphasis. The room erupted in laughter. "God, you're ruthless," Kara said, clapping. "No, she's finally waking up. You don't owe a man your peace just because he pays the mortgage." I stepped in just as Kara mimicked my voice in an exaggerated, slow tone. "But sweetie, I work all day. Why don't you handle the laundry?" More laughter. I placed my bag down carefully, as if any louder sound might reveal how fast my heart was pounding. Melissa noticed me. She didn't flinch. She simply offered an unreadable half-smile. "Hey, you're home early." "Long day," I replied, hanging up my coat. "I didn't realize we had company." "We're not company," Kara said before Melissa could answer. "We're rescuing a woman." "From what?" I asked evenly. "The burden of folding towels." They exchanged knowing glances. Justine took a slow sip of wine and leaned back comfortably. "No, sweetie, from being married to a father in a husband costume."
That comment wasn't clever. It was coordinated. That's what made it worse. I stood there, looking at the three of them glowing in the artificial warmth of mutual validation. Sarcasm mistaken for strength. Bitterness reframed as independence. "I see," I said calmly. "Well, if Melissa agrees with that, then I think this marriage is over." The laughter stopped. Melissa blinked. "Wait, what?" I inhaled deeply. The air felt definitive. "If I'm a caricature to you and your friends, then we don't have a marriage, we have a public relations problem in our living room." Kara stood, narrowing her eyes. "Daniel, don't be dramatic, we were joking." "No," I interrupted, keeping my focus on Melissa. "They were joking. You were laughing." Melissa opened her mouth, then closed it again. I nodded once. "I'll grab a few things. Troy has a spare room." She remained still as I walked past them. I caught Kara's smirk as I turned down the hallway, the same dismissive expression Melissa sometimes wore when discussing my schedule. 5 minutes later, I returned with a duffel bag. Melissa was standing now, arms crossed, lips trembling, but she still said nothing. At the door, I paused. "Enjoy the jokes. Just don't be surprised when the punchline leaves." Then I walked out. That night, I stayed on Troy's couch, half awake, half unsettled, but strangely lighter. Because when a man walks away not in anger, but in clarity, that isn't weakness, it's release. Troy's apartment was a simple 2-bedroom off 6th Street, a worn couch, a television mounted slightly off-center, the persistent smell of microwave burritos. But it was quiet. No sharp sighs from across the room, no pointed clatter of dishes, no tension sitting on the couch like an uninvited third presence.
Just peace. That first morning, I made eggs for myself. No one asking how I wanted them, no sarcastic remarks about cholesterol, just scrambled eggs, a mug of black coffee, and basketball highlights playing quietly in the background. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed silence. Later that afternoon, I checked my phone. A dozen unread messages from Melissa. "You left. Seriously, we need to talk. This isn't how adults handle conflict. I was venting. They were jokes. You can't seriously think that's a reason to walk out." The next messages shifted in tone. "I just wanted us to grow. I miss who we were before the resentment. Maybe I said too much, but you didn't have to make it public by storming out like that." Not once did she write the word I was looking for. Sorry. That night, Troy handed me a beer and turned on the game. "You're oddly calm for someone who just walked out on his marriage." I shrugged. I think the explosion started long before I packed a bag. He looked at me closely. "So what now?" "Now," I said, taking a sip, "I breathe." Melissa continued texting every day. I replied with facts, not emotions. Polite, brief, detached. "Yes, I'm fine. No, I'm not ready to talk. Let's give each other space." Her messages carried a thin layer of guilt mixed with subtle pressure, emotional nudges meant to pull me back without addressing anything real. I recognized the pattern, the familiar emotional pivot. The difference now was that I wasn't reacting to it. I slept better than I had in months. No one pulling the blankets away at 2 a.m., no heavy sighs if I moved too loudly, no criticism about how I breathed when I was stressed. Just me, and that was enough. There's something about distance. It lets you hear your own thoughts again. Mine were becoming clearer. She said she wanted growth, but what she meant was compliance. She missed who we were, but not enough to examine her role in changing it. And I was remembering who I had been before sarcasm became background noise. By the end of the third day, I stood in front of Troy's mirror and didn't see a broken man. I saw someone choosing calm. For the first time in years, that felt like strength. A few days later, her name appeared on my screen again, this time just one sentence. "The house feels strange without you." No humor, no deflection, just that. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the phone. Behind me, Troy was making pancakes, humming off-key to a 90s R&B song. The contrast was obvious. My friend, dancing in a stained t-shirt, while my wife sent quiet messages into the silence she had helped create. "Is she surrendering?" Troy asked, leaning over my shoulder. "More like reporting the weather," I replied. "Strange without you isn't an apology." He raised an eyebrow. "Still, she sounds less aggressive today." "She sounds lonely," I corrected, "not accountable." He slid a plate of pancakes toward me. I took a bite. The syrup was cheap and overly sweet, but that morning it tasted better than any carefully prepared meal I'd eaten in a tense kitchen. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I went for a walk. The morning was cool. Fog lingered along the sidewalks, softening the edges of the city. I let my mind wander. I remembered how Melissa used to hum while folding laundry in our first apartment, how she would rest her head on my shoulder during bad horror movies, how we used to laugh when we defended each other, not positioned ourselves against one another. Those memories felt distant. That afternoon, I finally replied, "I'm sure it does." Nothing more. She responded almost immediately. "I didn't think it would feel like this." "Like what?" I asked. "Empty, too quiet. I keep reaching for your coffee mug." It was unexpectedly reflective, but still no acknowledgement of what caused the fracture, no responsibility, just sadness. When I showed Troy, he nodded slowly. "She feels the shift, but she's hoping emotion replaces accountability." I gave a short laugh. Exactly, like the kitchen never happened, the laughter, the disrespect, as if loneliness cancels it out. He tapped his spoon against his cereal bowl. "That's not remorse, that's withdrawal." That evening, we sat on the balcony with inexpensive beer and folding chairs, watching the city lights blur through the haze. I reread her message, "I miss who we were." And the truth was, I didn't. I missed who I was before I had to defend basic decency as if it were controlled, before sarcasm became background noise, before friends turned into judges. I missed being able to breathe inside my own home, and that version of me was returning. A few days later, the sky turned gray, undecided. Rain tapped steadily against the windows, slowing everything down. Troy was out buying groceries. I was half watching an old crime show when someone knocked. 3 soft taps. I stayed seated for a moment. Something about it felt intentional. When I opened the door, Melissa stood there. No makeup, hoodie, jeans, her hair pulled back into a loose bun that looked unplanned. She looked like someone who hadn't slept. Not dramatically, just genuinely tired. For a moment, we stood there in silence, the rain outlining her against the gray afternoon. "Hey," she said softly. I stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" She nodded and walked in slowly, as if unsure of her place. She didn't sit immediately. Instead, she stood near the counter, lightly gripping the sleeves of her hoodie. "I didn't want to text," she said. "Not for this." I waited. She drew in a breath. "I told Kara and Justine I was thinking about fixing things with you, that I wanted to talk, really talk." I remained quiet. "They laughed," she continued, "said I was weak, that coming back to you would make me look pathetic." I leaned against the chair, arms crossed. "And I told them I didn't care." That caught my attention. Her voice cracked slightly, not for sympathy, not for effect, just a natural break. "I haven't heard from them since," she added. "I guess I broke the rules." "Seems that way," I said calmly. She finally sat across from me, pulling her sleeves over her hands the way she used to during late-night conversations, back when discussions weren't competitions. "I don't know what I expected them to say," she continued, but hearing them mock me for wanting to repair my marriage, her sentence faded. It made me realize something. I tilted my head. "What?" "They didn't want me happy. They wanted me divorced. If I was divorced, I'd be like them. It would validate their bitterness." That felt genuine, unscripted. I nodded. "So why are you here?" She hesitated. "I don't know exactly what I'm asking for. Not yet. I just wanted to face you." I studied her. Her eyes were steady. Her tone wasn't calculated. She seemed nervous, but not manipulative. For the first time since all of this began, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even waiting for an apology. I was simply observing someone who had finally stepped out of the echo chamber of her own pride. I didn't offer reassurance. I didn't reach for her. I said the only thing that felt honest. It's strange, isn't it, when the crowd disappears and the only voice left is your own. She nodded. It's louder than I thought it would be. I didn't agree to anything that day, not to moving back, not to resuming where we left off. But 2 days later, I agreed to meet her at the house. Neutral ground, familiar territory. I parked in the driveway like a guest, walked up the same steps I had walked down weeks earlier. The key I carried no longer worked. She had quietly changed it back after we spoke. A small gesture, perhaps. She opened the door before I knocked. No smile, no small talk, just a nod and a step aside. The house felt still. The photos remained in place. My jacket hung near the door, but something had shifted. The air smelled like pine instead of lavender, as if even the space had reset. We sat at the dining table. No wine, no distractions. Melissa cleared her throat. I've been thinking about that night in the kitchen, about how quickly I turned everything into a performance. She paused. I said nothing. I keep replaying your expression, not when you raised your voice, when you didn't. That quiet moment before you left, that's what stayed with me. I waited. She drew in a breath. I'm sorry. 2 words, direct, no qualifiers, no but. Just the apology I hadn't realized I needed to hear. I let my friends turn our problems into a joke. I didn't defend you. Worse, I laughed. I thought I was being strong and independent. I was actually scared, angry, maybe even careless. Her voice stayed steady. There was no performance this time, just clarity. I leaned forward slightly. So what do you want from me? I don't know exactly, she admitted. I don't want to pressure you to come back. I don't want to pretend nothing happened. I just want to stop lying, to myself and to you. She reached into her pocket and placed her phone on the table, screen unlocked to her messages with Kara. I scrolled. Kara calling her desperate, mocking her for reconsidering, ridiculing the idea of forgiveness. Then Melissa's response. I'd rather be happy than right. I'd rather fix what I damaged than protect pride that didn't help me. I looked up. Why show me this? Because I don't want secrets anymore. I want transparency. We sat quietly. No tension now, just reflection. I'm not the same man who walked out that night, I said carefully. I know, she replied, and she smiled. Not the sarcastic smile she once used around her friends, not the defensive one layered with irony. This one was softer, genuine. We didn't celebrate. We didn't dramatize the moment. We simply remained there. The respect I thought had disappeared wasn't gone. It had been buried under performance, ego, and outside influence. But that noise had faded. In its place was a different kind of silence. Not cold, not strained, just calm. Later that evening, we stood side by side at the sink, washing dishes quietly. I glanced at her, soap on her hands, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly messy. You know, I said, I still don't care about your chore charts. She smirked. I threw them away. I raised an eyebrow. All of them? Well, she said, nudging me lightly, I may have laminated one, just in case. I smiled. We'll negotiate. She nodded. Together this time. That was the agreement. No more silent punishments, no more group-driven judgment. Just 2 people choosing to rebuild what they nearly lost, not by ignoring the past, but by learning from it.